Millions of children were pushed into poverty with the choice Republican lawmakers and Democrat Joe Manchin made to end certain pandemic-era programs, underscoring just how true it is that poverty is a policy choice. My name is Brittany Page. This is The Page Perspective. I'm so grateful to have so many of you commenting, sharing your perspectives and your stories with me and the other community members here, engaging with the content that I share on this channel. We're really seeing the power of community in those comments, so keep it going. Remember that it's free to subscribe. I would also so appreciate if you took the time to check out my Substack. It is also free to subscribe there. I recently wrote a personal reflection about a book that I read and an interview that we did on I Doubt It podcast with Robert P. Jones, president and founder of the Public Religion Research Institute. I would appreciate if you would subscribe. It's free to subscribe on the Substack and read that reflection. He wrote an important book and I'm happy to spread the word about it. So now to the topic for today's video. The United States Census Bureau released its annual report on poverty in the United States. We know that because of public policy choices like the child tax credit, for example, that child poverty reached an all-time low in 2021, dropping to 5.2%. With the expiration of pandemic-era programs like the expanded child tax credit, the child poverty rate has more than doubled to 12.4% in 2022. If we look at this graph from Child Trends, we see this means 3.8 million children were experiencing poverty in 2021, which then shot up to 9 million children in poverty in 2022. Now, this is basically a return to pre-pandemic levels of poverty. It's not a new high for poverty. In fact, let's zoom out a little bit on this for a second and take a look at this graph shared by Columbia University's Zach Parolin. This graph starts at 1967, and based on this graph, we can see that the jump from 2021 to 2022 is a record increase in child poverty, the largest increase in 50 years. The main takeaway for me in that graph is the all-time low for child poverty that was reached through policies like the child tax credit. You might be asking, what happened? Why were millions of children saved from the devastating effects of poverty in 2021, only to be pushed back into that precarious and stressful place the very next year? If you need a refresher on the child tax credit, you can check out my long-form video from a few months ago where I go into detail. But if you need a quick refresher, the child tax credit was included in the American Rescue Plan and allowed parents to receive $250 to $300 per child per month for 6 months. It wasn't a new tax credit, it was just expanded, and it was unique in that it resulted in direct monthly payments to families to spend how they choose. This amounted to just 6 monthly payments in 2021 of a couple $100, and yet millions of children were lifted out of poverty. I know what you're thinking. Who could possibly be against this? Enter the Republican Party and Democrats Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. Democratic Senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, was loud about this. While he's now making the rounds, asking about whether he should run for president, talking about creating a third party for moderates, we should all remember who and what he is. There's not a day that should go by without him being asked one question that I'm just dying to know the answer to. How does it feel to have a hand in pushing millions of children into poverty, Joe? How's it feel? Well, he opposed this measure to lift children out of poverty for fear that the money would be spent by their parents on drugs. We hear this all the time from Republicans, concerned about how benefits are spent, but do they care what the research shows on this issue? Time and time again, we see that people know how best to spend their benefits to meet their own needs. In a recent Center on Budget and Policy Priorities analysis of U.S. Census Bureau Household Pulse survey data, that was a lot, we saw that families spent their child tax credit primarily on food, utilities, rent, or mortgage, or education expenses. Similarly, in a new working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research, researchers estimated families spent their child tax credit funds primarily on food and shelter. As always, all of my sources are linked in the description so you can see these items in greater detail. So we know that people receiving benefits know how best to use them, and we should start trusting people to make these decisions for themselves. Now, up to this point, I have focused on the child tax credit, but it's important to note that this poverty measure, specifically the Supplemental Poverty Measure, SPM, that I've cited repeatedly throughout this video, it includes other types of benefits too. The Supplemental Poverty Measure is calculated with child tax credits, SNAP, also known as food stamps, free school lunch, earned income tax credits, stimulus checks, and then necessary expenses are subtracted to arrive at the measure. Now let's look at the poverty-reducing impact of the child tax credit compared to some of these other programs. This chart is showing the change in number of people in poverty after including each type of benefit in 2021. If you see the fourth line there, we can see that 5.3 million people were lifted out of poverty with the expanded child tax credit. This is a powerful policy to fight poverty. And yet, lawmakers in this country made the choice to let it fade away. Are corporate tax cuts really more important than this? Is the annual $800+ billion Department of Defense budget, when they can't even tell us how they're spending the money and repeatedly failing all of their audits, is that more important than child poverty? We have the data. We know how to eliminate child poverty. So what are we waiting for? As we wrap here, I want to say that I feel a personal connection to this. I talk a lot about growing up poor. I've done videos about it. I'm not ashamed or afraid to talk about it. I had many advantages growing up, but I also grew up on food stamps, receiving handouts at Christmas time from organizations to ensure children of incarcerated parents had gifts under the tree, eating church-funded or food pantry-delivered Thanksgiving meals, worried about the water getting shut off, not being able to use the heater in the winter, worried about losing shelter and being in the street. Survival, survival, survival. It's no way to live, always focused on survival. And my worldview will always be informed by these foundational experiences I had as a poor kid. I'm grateful it is, even if it wasn't easy going through it, because now I'm here and I can talk about these experiences and push for more people to receive the help that I got. And I would hope, that if you start hearing me talk about picking myself up by the bootstraps or how I've accomplished what I have on my own, that you would give me a nice little dose of reality. Because the reality is that I would be nowhere without public policy investments that said, we're going to support you during this difficult time. We're going to invest in you because we know what you're capable of. We know what you can do. And I'm not special. With the right support, the necessary financial benefits, the ability to focus on school, and other priorities outside of day-to-day survival, every child, every person can thrive. And we should want that. Regardless of your political affiliation, everyone should want to create a world in which people, especially children, have the necessary support to thrive and create the life that they see for themselves. We can only do that with the right policy choices. So please say it with me and tell everyone you know that poverty is a policy choice. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call 657-464-7609, or you can send an email to idoubt.dollemore.com. You can also support my work on Patreon at patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this channel with someone you think needs to hear the message. I appreciate you. See you next time.